Ladies and gentlemen, the Dorian Gray of the Theatre Royal Haymarket, please welcome the greatest comedian on the planet, Miss Joan Rivers!
What did you get out of bringing your show to London, to the London Haymarket?
Oh, it was the most exciting moment probably in the last 20 years of my career. I was new there, and I wanted to see what a new person, if I was current and if the critics would like me. I'm so old hat in America. I'm so expected to be funny. And to come into London and have new critics look at you as a new personality, it was magical.
Greetings from ex-President Clinton. I went to Wimbledon with him today, and I saw him.
Joan Rivers wanted to be interviewed in her apartment in New York, and the strange thing about her apartment wasn't that it was quite big, although it was quite big, and it was in a fashionable part of New York, and it was a fashionable part of New York, but it looked like Versailles. She'd gone to Versailles in France. She thought Versailles was wonderful with the mirrors and the chandeliers and this and that, and she'd brought it back to her apartment. And somehow it worked. The little chairs, this, that, the other. It was strange, but there it was, and that's how I interviewed her. And she was a remarkable contradiction. She was a middle-class New York Jewish girl brought up by parents who saw her brilliance and wanted her to marry well and probably be a doctor and an accountant, and well, what all parents want for their bright children. Instead, she said she wanted to be a comedian. And they disowned her for a while, and then when she became successful, they made up. But she looked like, and she'd had a lot done to her face and so on, she looked like a sort of upwardly mobile career woman in New York, fast talking, knowing where what was what. And when she was chucked out of television, when she fell out with Fox, she took to selling jewelry on television, and she was very, very good at it. You would have thought she'd have been a very good businesswoman. But what she wanted to do is to make people laugh, and she did. And she cultivated her audiences very strategically. She was particularly popular with gay audiences, and she went to gay clubs in New York and tested her material there, and then brought it out into a wider and wider public, and was irresistibly drawn to that. It was a strange experience there. She couldn't have been more courteous, she couldn't have been more helpful, and she couldn't have been more exposed either. I wouldn't say I felt sorry for her, but she'd had to fight for what she got, whereas if she'd stayed upwardly mobile on the right side of New York, she would have sailed to the top. Instead, she dived down into comedy.
I'm upset. Yeah. I had to cremate my mother-in-law today, so. Yeah, and I was coming down here, I thought I should have done it. Oh, I should have waited till she was dead.
No one should go into our business unless it's a calling. If you can do anything else, you must, because it is the meanest, most difficult business, and people with great talent sometimes don't get anywhere. There's so many variables besides the talent. I had this calling. I had no choice. I really had no choice.
You know those people, you get what you want. You know what I mean? Oh, Joan, I want to be cremated. I want to be cremated. Well, I had some time today. Come on, Betty, hop in. Here comes a real sick one. Think Auschwitz. Come on. Yes, I know. Oh, over the line, Miss Rivers. Over the line.
My whole family was funny, except for my mother, who used to say, I'm an appreciator. They'd say, why aren't you funny? She'd say, I'm an appreciator. I was always funny. I was never the class clown. That came later, where you crawl around the stage, you know. But I was always witty.
What do you do? Antiques. Oh. Antiques. What could you get for an old Jew?
What sort of background was it? Is Larchmont a rather posh, to use the English word, district?
Yes, there's the yacht club and the country clubs. Yes, it was a very comfortable place to be brought up in. I was 22 and I wanted to be a comedian. I wasn't ready. And my mother said, well, why don't you try it, dear, at the country club? And they went out through the kitchen. It was a total disaster. My mother both came from Russia. Both came over because of the revolution. My mother came over because they were court Jews. They sold fur and bricks and meat to the Tsar's army. So there was no such thing as pogroms. When a pogrom started, the Tsar sent people to surround their house. That was my mother. So they had to get out because the Tsar would get out. My father came from the poorest of the poor, and they got out because they couldn't live in Russia. They couldn't make a living. And they met over here, and they were very upwardly. My mother wanted back what she had as a child.
Which was what?
Which was affluence and great. She would remember the servants coming in with silver trays with pears stuffed with some kind of a walnut. That was one of her earliest memories. And being brought into her mother, who was always having tea, and she thought, I can't wait to be a mother so that I can sit and have silver. You know, so my mother wanted all that back.
Did she get it back?
Yes, unfortunately, she got it back by getting my father tremendously into debt. Right?
Given that your mother was so determined for you to have this and that and the other, were there any rules, were there any ambitions that she had for you? That you had to do this, you had to be like that, you had to be like the other?
Their ambition was, of course, to be brilliantly educated and to marry brilliantly. Hey, I'm all for that.
We're all overeducated. You don't know that? Tell me anybody. I have a philosophy major. I can go to the butcher, prove the meat doesn't exist. What good does it do? All you need is big breasts and mouth always open with your tongue hanging out. Men love that. Hello. What's your name? What? Karen. From now on, Corinne. Sit up straight, Corinne. Breasts up. Pinch those shoulder blades. Learn to open the door with your breasts. I'm telling you, it's very...
I tried to follow the rules because it was so important to my parents, and I did get the education. I'm thrilled I got the education, looking back. And then I married the way you were supposed to marry. And then when that didn't work out, I thought, that's it.
Her father, Dr. Molinsky, was a nice middle-class doctor with his own values of what his daughters should be. You know, her sister Barbara, Phi Beta Kappa, went to law school, you know. And here's another Phi Beta Kappa daughter. She wants to be on the stage.
When I said, I want to go into show business, I mean, they didn't talk to me for 2 years, close to 2 years.
Really?
Yes, really.
So these 2 years, I suppose there'll be some kind of allowance coming in from your parents.
Nothing.
Really?
There was no money. There was no... Once my father tried to have me committed. That was the only thing that went on during those 2 years. He
committed
came,
in what sense? Really to a...
Really, I don't know if he really would have done it. But they were so angry with me. And he came to a place where I was living and tried to drag me home. And it was an all-woman. I was such a good girl. And they really thought I was trampy and whoring around. I was living in an all-woman's dormitory. I mean, really the lowest.
How did you get out of that?
I went home for about 3 or 4 weeks, and then my mother came around a little bit and finally just said, just let her.
I think for Joan Rivers, she was going into comedy at a time when it was a more unusual pursuit, certainly for someone in the middle classes and certainly, of course, for a woman. And so she was doing something incredibly trailblazing. It is extraordinary to think back that when she said she wanted to become a comedian, her father, and I don't think this is a joke, I think this was true, had threatened to put her in an institution. The idea of women, you know, people say she was a terrible role model for women because she was so horrible to other women, and that is certainly the case. She was horrible to and about women on stage all the time. But it's very easy to judge somebody by the standards of now rather than their own standards, and it's really easy to judge somebody who was sufficiently ahead of their time that when they started their profession, people threatened to do what they have always threatened to do with women who speak out, which is lock them up and call them mad.
The nice thing was, they both lived to see me successful, which was terrific. And my mother would go around and say, which I gave her such credit for, we had nothing to do with it. She did it on her own. We had nothing to do with it. And my father would say, we always knew. I would think, what?
During the 1970s and 80s, Joan Rivers was at the height of her fame. She was a huge star in American television, co-hosting The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson.
Do that anymore, Sailor. Remember those jokes? But it's lovely to be here. It's a great audience, by the way, but I came out and spoke to them ahead of time, while I to the Midwest. But it's a great audience, and somebody said I look very good, and that's because they do the reason I like hosting the show, I should explain to you, which is wonderful for the women, you'll understand, they do your hair and your makeup for free. And tonight they did something even better. The wardrobe lady, who usually, as I get undressed, just goes, she got, right this way, sir. She got me a new brassiere. Bitter Ed. She got me a new brassiere. Can you see? Can you get a close-up? Wait. Thank you. This is a push-up, shove-over brassiere. I just want you all to know, it's nothing to do with me. It starts down here, and you push everything.
So Fox was starting up, and we went over to Fox, and they offered me my own nighttime show in direct opposition to Carson. And I was ready for it. I mean, I was ready for it. And that went along from the beginning. It was hard. My husband had a nervous breakdown and was very shaky. And he came up against Rupert Murdoch. And there was friction from the beginning. And finally, the numbers were fine. Everyone always thinks the show tanked. It didn't. We did very well. From the day one, they were in the black. It's all very boring, but it's such a sore subject with me. They called me on a Thursday afternoon. Here I go. And they said, you can stay, but your husband can never come on the set again. And my husband was having a nervous breakdown then. And I said, I go with my husband. And that was the end of everything for about 8 years. Very tough times. And I was off television. NBC put out terrible releases that I had left Carson. Fox put out releases, our numbers weren't good. My husband committed suicide over it 3 weeks after it happened. Vegas said we don't want a woman working whose husband has committed suicide. It was just a very difficult time. So, rough times.
Shall we cut for a moment or two?
No, I'm fine. Take 1 second just so we can fix the makeup.
When you said you were off for a number of years, did that mean that your possibilities of keeping your career at that level had gone for 12 years? So does that mean that not only were you not on primetime television for your sort of talent, but all sorts of other...
It affects everything.
...routes were blocked?
Of course. They forget about you. But I wasn't going to go down in the flames. And I think I found every other way in. I found morning television. I did a morning show. I went on daytime shows. I went on any show that wanted me. Hi, I'm Joan Rivers, and guess what? Just when you thought it was safe, haha, I'm back. It's my 7th anniversary show. Can you believe it? 7 years, so much fun on QVC. We're going to have special anniversary prices. It's going to be on September 12th, 13th, and 14th. Please be there. I love you all. Everybody knew the story. It was like a little show business inside story. I was just... They tried to destroy me. It sounds so dramatic. I just figured, you're not going to. I just thought if I'm going to be funny enough, you're going to have to let me back. And that's what happened. You have to.
When her husband Edgar committed suicide, literally the first joke she told when she went back on stage after that had happened was, I knew I shouldn't have taken the bag off my head when we were having sex. Now, of course you could argue, and I'm sure people have, that she is was a sort of sociopathic person who could turn such horrific personal tragedy into that kind of cheap joke. I would argue she was using it as exactly the right kind of catharsis for her. It's a constant mistake made about comedians that when they make jokes about something, they are making light of it, to quote the people who criticise them. She was giving it her full professional attention. You cannot take it more seriously than that as a comedian. And you know, from looking at the interview she did for example, the South Bank show, decades later, that just talking about that period in her life made her start to cry. The pain didn't not exist for her. It's simply that she chose to turn it into comedy. And I think people who aren't comedians or don't understand comedy often find that impossible to kind of believe.
Joan Rivers moved back to New York from LA after her husband's suicide in 1987.
New York is a very comforting city because A, you can be very anonymous, B, it's not a company town. I thought it was wonderful. You would walk down the street and a garbage man would call out and say, I lit a candle for you. It's nothing like New York. It's a very embracing city.
What made you set up your own business and go into business?
I was starving. Not starving, but I was scratching and scrounging. And they came to me again, and they said, do you want to sell jewelry on television? And that was, now everybody does it. In those days, it was the bottom of the barrel. They would take dead celebrities and work their mouths. And I said, how much? Sure, whatever. And they said, design some jewelry you would wear. And it worked. And I loved it. Became a business, and I was smart enough to treat it like a business. And I really loved it. I now run a business with the largest fashion jewelry company in the United States. But I'm still playing a role. I still think of myself as Joan Crawford in a movie. I go to work and I lead my team to victory.
So you're a mogul?
I'm a mogul. I just came from QVC. I was there all weekend. Everybody see me? Our TSV sold out. Thank you. Sold out at 10 o'clock in the morning. Lots of beads. Yeah, God bless that child labor. I'm telling you, I couldn't sell 42,000 necklaces, all little children. And it's... What, I'm gonna go with as a union? I won't make a f***ing penny. What? I don't believe that child labor is so terrible. Hear me out. Here, not so terrible. What are you gonna... Hello, little Imelda. No last name. Hello, little... Would you rather be a little 8-year-old prostitute or come work for Aunt Joni in her nice air-conditioned basement? And look, Christmas, you can play with the dead dog. Earth.
Do you feel any taboo subjects inside you? Do you feel, no, I can't really talk about that?
If I can talk about it, then I figure it's not taboo. And certain things I won't talk about.
Such as?
It depends on the moment, but I think death of a child, very difficult. It's also, you know, all the cliches, tragedy plus time is comedy. You know, and it's all true. There's certain things you're just not ready to laugh at. And then I don't. When I feel I'm ready to laugh at it, I take a shot in this club. And very often I'll say, gone too far, eh? The other night in the nightclub, I did an Auschwitz joke. They weren't having any of it. I said, okay, fine, gone too far, have we? But the whole point is to get your audience to be your friends and to make it look like you're just talking at a dinner table. And so you overstep. You can pull back. Ding dong, Mrs. Yes, we found he's not dead. No! Times are such tough times, and there are no boundaries anywhere in life, so there's certainly not going to be any boundaries on stage for a comedian. We're told every day we may go to war, and in New York, we're waiting to be blown up. I mean, you have no idea. every day since 9/11 is a given day. So I think it's very rough times.
I hope her legacy will continue to be that of somebody who was prepared to tell jokes that most people would not tell at a time when most people wouldn't do them. We lionise Lenny Bruce for exactly the same qualities, but because Joan Rivers lasted a long time, it became very easy to see her as sort of, you know, what a joke, because she was an old woman, because she had plastic surgery, because of all the things that, you know, we can't bear. Women should just sort of disappear and we can hide them in a cupboard and then we don't have to think about them. And because she continued to push boundaries, because she became, if anything, more shocking as she got older rather than less, because she could get away with saying worse things on TV without getting put in jail. I hope she reminds us that comedy should push at the edges of what we find acceptable.
I'm going to be cremated. You're going to be cremated. You're too young to think about this. Except I'm scared. What if they lose the ashes? You always hear these stories. What if I end up being snorted by Whitney Houston? What if I end up... That could happen. I could be mixed into a bag or something, you know? I could end up in Bobby Brown's ass. I mean, it's just... I worry. Sure, you wouldn't give a shit if it happened to me.